if he doesn't win, he might not see that Jake Paul back. He might not see that Jake Paul fight in his future. If KSI does win against FaZe Temper in this month, I do think that you do see that fight happen. Maybe not at the end of this year, maybe a little bit towards the end of next year or the beginning of next year in 2024, just because both of these guys are trying to build their own boxing brands. A meet in the middle of both organizations is going to be a little hard, I think, but it just all comes down to what are they going to agree when it comes to negotiations. What the fuck is going on YouTube? I take one day off and I feel like me personally, I missed the whole entire month. It will not happen again. Just want to say that first. I know I missed Monday's upload. So if you were looking for that video on Monday, I'm sorry about that. It won't happen again. The meat and potatoes is what you all came here for, and that is what I'm about to give you. First, we had Dylan Dennis being a bitch, and then we had FaZe Temper having to get subbed in, and now it looks like KSI's the bitch in this whole entire situation. You've seen it, most likely heard about it in some way, shape, or form. Jake Paul versus KSI has been talked about. These guys have been at each other's necks for as long as I can remember these guys being on YouTube. Maybe not KSI, he's been on YouTube for a while. But since Jake Paul's been in the scene, he's always had something against KSI, or always had something to say at least. If you guys haven't seen the clips, we're going to get into them a little bit in a second. But I just want to go over a few things first. For those of you that don't know, KSI was supposed to fight Dylan Dennis this January. Now, Dylan Dennis backed out for who knows whatever fucking reason that pussy backed out, but he backed out. The show must go on, so now we move on to FaZe Temper versus KSI. The question is, if KSI was the number one guy, or the guy who started this all, why doesn't he fight Jake Paul, who's like that up-and-comer, the best guy out of YouTube boxing right now? So the question's there. Now, for those of you that haven't seen this clip, it's on Jake Paul's YouTube channel. A little bit of backstory of this clip. So you have KSI going on the MMA Hour talking to Ariel Helwani. Some questions being brought up of when he's going to fight Jake Paul, if he's going to fight Jake Paul. Talked and answered. I didn't even watch how KSI answered. I just saw how Jake Paul responded to what KSI said. So I'm assuming it was something about Jake Paul ducking a fight. I know that these guys have gone into negotiations before, and then the negotiations kind of just fall through. So they go to Twitter and they go on this live Twitter thing where multiple people can talk and other people are muted.
Waste of time. Why don't you just give the fans what they want? It's a waste of time. Like even Mr. Beast, comes on your podcast and is like, "Yo, why don't you just fight Jake?" And you're like, "Oh."
Now here you guys hear one of the other listeners or viewers in this live stream thing on Twitter. I believe it was one of KSI's friends actually who said like, "Come on, man," when he said, "I'm trying to build Misfits Boxing," which I think is an easy cop-out or an excuse to not fight Jake Paul. And in my opinion, I know I have an opinion on who won this little controversy or little back and forth fight, but I'll let you guys continue to watch.
Are you here to build Misfits? Because you just said you were here to take me out. So which one is it?
Yeah, I'm here to build Misfits, take you out. I'm saying that, Misfits is long term. Okay.
Now, right there, you see KSI kind of agree, but at the same time kind of start to backstep. Like, yeah, I did say that, but...
I'm ready. I'm ready, Corby.
Yeah, this is cap, though.
I believe that's his friend, Corby.
But then the negotiations don't say that.
Bro, you know that I agree. I agreed to fight you. I agreed to fight you for free, and you know that. And
now, this point that Jake Paul is about to bring up is pretty important in this story.
Everyone online knows that. On short notice, you had me 2 weeks before your fight. I could have fought you for free. I could have fought you for free on short notice, and you still pussied out.
He wants to fight for charity. Fight Tommy for charity.
Tommy's not gonna fucking show up either, brother. You
Talking about Tommy Fury right there.
You and him. What's in the water in the UK? Cause y'all be pussies. Y'all be ducking, bro. Hey, duck, goose. Duck, goose.
And that's where I'm going to kind of end up his, and they kind of just went back and forth on the same things there. Now, for those of you that don't know and are big fans of Jake Paul, and for some reason you're a fan of Jake Paul and you live under a fucking rock and haven't heard this news, Jake Paul has actually signed to the PFL. Jake Paul has signed to this organization, showing that he's going to be fighting in MMA as well as fighting in boxing. So they're going to be adding a whole entire boxing scene to this organization. Not only does one championship kind of do that with Muay Thai fights, kickboxing fights, grappling only fights. This is a thing that a lot of organizations are starting to do. Who knows if the UFC does something like this, but I think it's awesome that Jake Paul is going into this type of style of fighting, as well as trying to become a little bit of a organizer in the actual organization. He does have a big following on YouTube, and with that can bring a lot more of a fan base, more viewers to the boxing and MMA scene. And not only does that help fighters, but I think it just helps the MMA community in general. It brings more eyes onto the sport. It helps, gyms. It helps the actual fighters. Not only that, but Jake Paul is actually, he said it on video, and I believe it's true. It's hard to say this and not back it up, and he's only been doing nothing but trying to help fighters in this way. The PFL itself is actually going to be giving 50% of the revenue that these super fights make to the fighters. 50% of the revenue. If he's doing this in the PFL, the UFC is going to try and do something to adopt this. If not, all the fighters that go to the UFC, all they want to do is make the biggest bag possible. They're going to go to the PFL. It's the same thing with people going to Bellator or One Championship. All of these fighters in different organizations might start to gravitate towards the PFL if no other company or organization is giving 50% of the revenue to their fighters. That is something that every fighter, I guarantee you, is going to want. And they're going to try and work towards that to get into these super fights. That is going to be a new goal of theirs. It's nothing but respect for Jake Paul. Not only did he talk the talk 2 years ago, calling Dana White out multiple times about how he doesn't give fighters enough money. And look at what he's doing now. He talked the talk. He's walking the walk now. As long as, no public information gets released that says he's doing anything other than 50% to these fighters, there's nothing but respect to Jake Paul. I don't care if you like the guy. I don't care if you hate the guy. He's doing something good for these people. And, when it comes to doing good for people, how the fuck could you hate that? The last thing I want to talk about this whole entire PFL thing is giving fighters the opportunity to go outside of the organization and achieve and acquire their own outside sponsors. These fighters can go out and get a Nike deal instead of a Reebok deal that the PFL might already have. Those similar situations that can now happen in the PFL can make these fighters more money. I'm not saying I'm a Jake Paul fan, but I'm a fan of what he's doing when it comes to bringing fighters more pay. I don't know how you couldn't be. Moving on, though, we can't really see this Jake Paul versus KSI thing. We can't see that fight if KSI loses to Face Temper. In my opinion, Jake Paul is better a boxer than Face Temper. He has way more in the ring experience against fighters with a big crowd. So I think that is where Jake Paul has going for him, and not really KSI, which puts pressure on KSI. And in that, if he doesn't win, he might not see that Jake Paul back. He might not see that Jake Paul fight in his future. If KSI does win against Face Temper in this month, I do think that you do see that fight happen. Maybe not at the end of this year, maybe a little bit towards the end of next year, or the beginning of next year in 2024. But I do think it's not an impossible thing to happen. I think the chances of it happening this year are a little bit more slim compared to next year, just because both of these guys are trying to build their own boxing brands. Maybe a little different for Jake Paul now that it's the PFL and not DAZN or whoever he was working with beforehand. But he's now trying to build PFL and has PFL obligations, as well as KSI is trying to build Misfits Boxing and has Misfits obligations. A meet in the middle of both organizations is going to be a little hard, I think. But it just all comes down to what are they going to agree when it comes to negotiations. That's going to be it for this one, guys. It's really all I can really talk about right now until we see KSI versus Face Temper. There's not much more we can talk about. I definitely think KSI has a little bit of the upper hand in that. You have KSI talk about fighting a southpaw on the MMA Hour. He talked extensively about why he chose Face Temper instead of any other fighter after Dylan Dennis backed out. Not only did he pick Dylan Dennis for a specific reason, but he picked him specifically because he was a southpaw fighter. He talked about the past 6 months, he's been looking for a southpaw fighter and training for a southpaw fighter. Obviously, KSI fights orthodox, so I think that him fighting a southpaw fighter is going to be a little bit more of a challenge. But if he's trying to improve his game overall, there's no reason why he shouldn't be focused on fighting a southpaw fighter. You should be well-versed in fighting an orthodox fighter and fighting a southpaw fighter. Maybe KSI can now go back and forth. Who the fuck knows? Either way, there's things to look out for fighting a southpaw fighter, and this is only going to help KSI, I think, in the long term of things. I think that's an important thing on why he chose Face Temper and, why he kind of is focusing on fighting a southpaw fighter, which, is a really smart move in my opinion. That's really all I've got for you guys. Again, let me know in the comments your opinions on this whole Jake Paul KSI Face Temper thing. If you guys are new here, hit that fucking subscribe button! I don't know why you didn't already, but if you're new here, if you guys are starting to become a fan of MMA, hit that subscribe button. We are coming at you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with MMA boxing videos, getting a little bit more into One Championship and other sorts of organizations. So hit that subscribe button if you're relatively new to MMA or if you're just new to these fighting organizations. And with that, if you guys enjoyed, hit that like button as well while you're at it, all right? It makes my day great, and hopefully this made your video great. And with that, have a great fucking day.